I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and work, the Yuwad and Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all First Nations, including Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who may be watching today's episode.
What I was telling myself wasn't true unless I gave it the energy that it was true.
These are essentially stories that we don't need to stick to this storyline, that we can change things.
Where your focus goes, energy flows. And I just all of a sudden was opened up to so much incredible possibility.
Welcome to shtsfcked, the podcast that gets real about addiction, mental health, and everything in between. I'm Paris, and I spent 17 years battling the bottle, 10 years hooked on meth, and I also did a stint in the escorting world, which nearly cost me everything, including my life. I was lost, disconnected, and completely unrecognizable from who I once was. With both lived and professional experience, including qualifications in alcohol and other drugs, I'm here to share what I've learned along the way. Shtsfcked isn't about offering the right way to recover. It's about showing that recovery is actually very personal. Every journey is unique, and this podcast brings you stories, insights, and practical tools to help you find what works for you. Now, just a disclaimer, we dive into some tough topics here, including addiction, all forms of abuse, trauma, mental illness, suicide, self-harm, and the realities of life in recovery. These discussions can be intense, so please take care while listening and just make sure you're in the right headspace too. Don't forget to follow or subscribe to the podcast. Your support actually helps us more than you know, and it's one of the best ways to keep these conversations going. I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome, MG. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Paris. I'm excited to be here.
And you're in Perth, hey?
Yes, I am in Perth. Yes.
Yeah, because I was like, the weather, it just keeps going. It's so weird at the moment. We're in winter, right? And it's like... It's like,
I don't think this counts. Honestly, I don't think this counts as winter. Like, I know I'm from New Zealand and I lived in Albany for 5 years and Esperance for 4 years. And I'm like, I have not got my winter jacket out, but a lot of people in Perth are complaining about it. So
honestly, like, because I even lived in Melbourne for 4 years, and now that was winter. That was like bone-chilling cold. And I still have a lot of friends over there, and they've been Snapchatting me. It's like 3 degrees. And then I Snapchat back, and it's like blue skies, sun. You're down at the beach.
Yeah, I was literally sunbathing the other day, lying on my grass, getting some beautiful vitamin D. You just cannot complain about winter in Perth.
No, and Perth gets such a bad rap, man. It is actually such an amazing place to be. I fucking love it.
Same, absolutely same. And I've been to a lot of places, and I'm like, if you are from Perth and you've never left Perth, maybe you think it's not good. But when you left this place and realised how shit's fucked in so many other places, actually here
seriously
golden.
And it's so beautiful. Like, it's such a beautiful space. Like, we're coastal. I find the pollution is nowhere near as bad as the eastern states. You can really feel the difference in the air when you go over there. But anyway, we're going on a tangent now.
I know. Move to Perth, everyone. That's the message from this podcast.
Come to Perth. That was where I was going with this. Come to Perth. And also book concerts here. Stop skipping us.
Right. Tay, where are you at?
All right. Well, we'll dive straight on in. So the first question I had for you, Em, is can you share with us a bit about your background and your experiencing managing the roller coaster that is mental health?
I can. And, I could give you the short version or the long version of this. We'll go with the short version. I have written an entire book on this, by the way, which I'll give you the link for.
Yes,
but
please do.
If I go all the way back to my childhood, when I was 5 years old, I was in the care of a counsellor for anger management. And, you think the only reason that could possibly happen is from trauma. And yes, there was trauma, and that was what the counsellor was dealing with. I had parents that were very young who really didn't love each other, who probably weren't ready to have a baby, and they split up when I was very young. And so I now know as an adult with children myself how much those first years really impact your mental health. But I also know now on reflection that I have actually got ADHD. And so ADHD, when undiagnosed, can show up as anger, anxiety, which is what for 30 years of my life I believed I was experiencing was a level of anxiety, a level of trauma response. And of course, I know now that it is still trauma response. There was still trauma there. But I spent a decade of my life going through the motions of the mental health system, trying to understand how I could better navigate my anxiety and, fix myself, and having therapies, medications, self-medications, all that kind of thing that, sometimes worked, sometimes didn't work, most of the time didn't work, and still got to the point where I thought, why do I still struggle with this? And that was when I, learned that I have ADHD, and things are still a roller coaster. Like, it's an ongoing roller coaster. It never ends. But I think I now am able to look at it at 37 years old and go, I feel that I went on this journey for a reason, and it will continue to happen. I'm looking down the barrel of like menopause in 10 years' time and thinking that's good, like hormonal changes. When I was pregnant, I had a huge mental roller coaster. People don't talk about prenatal depression. They talk about postnatal depression. But I was suicidal when I was pregnant for the first time, and I felt so alone. So there has been many, many times in my life that I have felt extremely alone. I can honestly say at this point now, I no longer feel alone, even when I am in the darkest places of my mental health, because it still happens. And because I talk about it, because I have these open, frank conversations, I never feel alone, which I think is really powerful, because so many people go through their entire life without that, right?
Yeah, no, I hear you there. And it's so vital as well to have that support network. And I find even particularly in addiction recovery, that's something that I really had to learn, and ensuring that I could learn to be vulnerable with people, which is scary. Like, it's terrifying. And I guess you get really caught up in the shame of it all. And, you get really scared that people are going to judge you, or you feel like a burden. Like, there's so many of those factors at play, and it prevents us from being open and honest about what's going on. And then we suffer in silence. Like, it's really hard.
Yeah, it's interesting that I feel like I've forgotten about that feeling of shame around it, because as soon as you said, I was like, that's right. Yeah, I did used to feel that way. And it's a bit of a light bulb moment right now to go, that didn't come up for me when I thought about my story, but I know that was very prevalent. I needed to show up as like, I'm coping. I don't need help. I was raised by my mum to be an independent woman because she had to leave this relationship. And so like being this independent woman meant like, just stand up, take it, move on. Don't worry about it. Don't let anyone know that you're struggling. And so people would be surprised, because I had a really good way, like a good facade. People would be like, oh, really? You're struggling? Like, we would have had no idea.
Yeah, and it's so common though, right? And I find that particularly with our older generation, so like our parents and things like that, they, were so ingrained for so long that speaking up was a weakness, that you just don't do it. It's just like, hush, hush, like don't let them know you're crazy. Like, just sweep that under the rug real quick. And so that kind of, there was a ripple effect from that, right? And even when I was growing up, I was definitely feeling very similar to you in the sense, like, bless my dad, love him to pieces, but he used to always tell me to drink a cup of cement and harden the fuck up.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Build a bridge and get over it, Emily. I'll give you something to cry about.
Yeah. We laugh now, but horrible.
Yeah, it is. It's very interesting reflecting on it. Like, you can laugh about it, but it is a really good thing that we've come full circle in recognizing that that's not a great way to parent, because, I don't say that kind of shit to my kids.
Yeah. And look, to them as well, like they were all doing the best that they could with the knowledge that they had, right? We have so much more knowledge available to us now that we're able to reflect and look at these things and look more inner as well, and, you know, be able to work on ourselves better than what they could back then. They didn't really have the resources and the knowledge then, I would say. So like even my parents, they're kind of like playing catch up at the moment, you know, really just trying to wrap their head around, you know, even being open and vulnerable. You know, now that they know it's accepted and it's welcomed, it's still difficult for them. It's still really hard.
Yeah, I think so too. I wrote a lot about my childhood in my book, and before I published it, I gave it to both my mum and my dad. And yeah, it opened up a lot of emotion for them. And I mean, I absolutely came from the place of what you don't know, and everyone is doing the best that they can with the resources that they have. And I truly believe they were doing the best that they could. They both thought that their way was the best way, and both of them had different ways of doing things, so that, you know, led them down the path of divorce, which back then was like also taboo, to be separating from your marriage. So there was a lot of things that were not helping them at all. So I'm really grateful now that we have the ability to have these conversations, that it is normalized to have these conversations. But I do know that probably both of them think, does she have to share so much of this stuff? Like, does she have to tell people?
Honestly, I cop that so much from my family. I do. I try not to go into too much detail in regards to my upbringing for that reason. I just try to respect them and just not cause any grief. But sometimes it still happens because they know what I'm referencing, and they're like,
they can read between the lines, but no one else is going to read between the lines.
No, exactly. So yeah, no, it's definitely stirred some stuff. Yep. But during all of this and what you were experiencing in regards to like your ADHD, your prenatal depression, postnatal depression, the suicide ideation, you know, what were your coping mechanisms, and like what did you rely on during that time, and how did that affect you like in the long run?
There was healthy coping mechanisms and unhealthy ones. Really starting with the unhealthy, because that was before I had the awareness of what was actually happening inside. And when I was young, so obviously because this was an issue from a very young age, it was anger. That was my coping mechanism, was to like release it through anger. And so I was violent, and that was all the way through into my teens. I was never violent at school. I was always violent at home. And occasionally violent in places like mosh pits. It was an outlet. It was a way for me to, I don't know, express myself. So violence, which, you know, not a particularly healthy way of dealing with your emotions. In my teenage years, it was sleeping with as many guys as possible. I lost my virginity when I was barely 13. And notably, quite a few guys lost their virginity to me. I got a bit of a reputation for that. But for me, it was filling the hole of love, and that I felt like I missed from my dad. And I didn't realize that at the time. I just thought I was super cool, that I was hot, that all the boys wanted me, blah, blah, blah. I often was cheating on my boyfriends. And like, I honestly think there wouldn't have been a boyfriend in high school that I didn't cheat on. Obviously, that pissed off a lot of people, including people who were friends of mine, whose boyfriends I slept with. So I was just really a bit of not a nice person. So I therefore hated myself. There was a lot of negative self-talk. It was interesting. I was like, I had morals in a sense around things like drugs when I was in high school. I wouldn't do drugs. I drank a lot of alcohol, but I wouldn't do drugs. And so somehow that made me morally superior to other people that were doing drugs. And when I went to university, that was when I started using a variety of drugs, amphetamines, party drugs. In New Zealand at the time, we actually had legal party drugs,
Really?
So there was a 3-year period from the age where I was 18 to 21, would you believe it, that party drugs were legal. And so I was able to you could go and buy them from a liquor shop, and it's crazy. Like,
It is wild.
It is wild. And so it really just gave us permission. And so it's actually the reason why I have issues with legalizing these things, because it was legal, it became more accessible and okay and normalized. And so actually that led me at that point in time, because of the timing in my youth, it led me down that path. And then it led me to illegal substances very, very easily. And from there, I ended up proposing to my then boyfriend while we were high one night. It was 2 a.m. We were so in love because we'd had so much MDMA and speed and ketamine and whatever. And I proposed. And the next day everyone was like, so is that legit? And we felt a bit like, oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, it totally is. So we had like an engagement party, all this shit. And then I was like, what the fuck am I doing? And I up and left the country. And that's when I left New Zealand. So that was 2008. I was like, I need to get away from this. This is not good. This is not healthy. But of course, I hadn't actually dealt with the problem. So the problem came with me. I traveled the world and I was just trying to find the cheapest bong, the cheapest bucket of alcohol. I was like, yes, $1 buckets of alcohol in Vietnam, like living the dream. I know, like when I went to Europe, I don't even remember Amsterdam because I was so stoned the whole time, and I really would love to go back there and actually experience it in a way that I can remember it. And so I traveled, I had fun, like honestly, had some incredible adventures, but a lot of the time I was wasted in some way. And eventually it all caught up. I was like, I need to become an adult now, right? Like I need to go and get a job, and I need to like get on with my life. And at that point I don't know if I'd call myself an alcoholic, but I couldn't function without, I couldn't go to sleep without alcohol. And so alcohol became my coping mechanism, which then led to more issues with sleep, me getting, at 22, I think I was given a script to sleeping pills. So they gave me a script to sleeping pills, to Mazepam, which is a strong sleeping pill, when I was 22, before giving me anything like, an anxiety medication. And I then was drinking alcohol with sleeping pills. So dangerous. Yeah, I remember in my final prac for teaching in a country town here in WA, at that point in time, really like it was one of the hardest years of my life because I was trying to learn so much. I was in a new place. I, had a boyfriend at the time who was abusive, and I was drinking myself to sleep as well as taking sleeping pills. But the more sleeping pills you take, the more you need to take. And there was one night that I woke up paralyzed on the floor next to my bed. So I must have fallen off the bed, and I was on the ground and I was awake, but I couldn't move my body. And I just thought, shit, this is not good. And that was a real awakening moment that something needs to change. And I'd love to say that it changed effective immediately, but it didn't because it took a long time. But I went to the doctor. I started on anxiety medication. I ordered these CDs because, showing my age here, that were like these meditation CDs called Holysync. I still have them. I've got them in like a box. So I was like, this is a thing that is like monumental in my timeline. And I had my laptop that had a CD player, so I'd plug it into my laptop and my earphones, and I did an hour of meditation a day, which sounds absolutely bonkers now because I have 2 kids and 2 businesses, and I do not have an hour to meditate a day. But I did it. I let go of coffee. I was drinking less alcohol. I was definitely still binge drinking, but I wasn't drinking on a daily basis, and it helped. And I thought, I can do this differently. I then introduced more exercise into my life, and that was partly because I was living in a country town. So this is where my first teaching gig was, in a country town, and sport is like how you get to know people in these country towns, right? So I joined a hockey team, never played hockey in my life, but that was how you meet people, so I did. And it was like a lot of running. I was so unfit, and I realized, oh shit, I really need to get my fitness up. So I started going for runs. I started doing some yoga, and I felt so good. I was like, oh my God, I literally feel like I'm high right now after going for a run. Because I do remember one night when I was totally off my face, probably snorting something, thinking, surely if I can feel this good, I can feel this good without this stuff. And then I remember running thinking, I feel this good without that stuff. Like, what is this? And I can say now that exercise has been my number one consistent coping mechanism for mental health issues since then. I struggle to maintain a lot of habits. I mean, alcoholism was a great habit at the point of time that I kept very well, and then I let go of it. Whereas exercise, every day I move my body in some way, and it all makes sense now because ADHD, like you need to actually move. But that has been a great coping mechanism for me, alongside having medication and therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy was extremely helpful, just understanding how to work through my worries, because I did have so much anxiety. Understanding sleep hygiene, which is really kind of a new term, but back then it was just kind of like, what are you doing before you go to sleep, so that you're not getting yourself hyped up before you actually put your head on the pillow. Coffee, I had no idea how much of an impact coffee had on my sleep. And then, just making those little changes and constantly learning. When I started my first business, when I had my first child, I also then went and studied NLP, so neuro-linguistic programming. And initially I studied it because I wanted to add it to my business, because I was doing personal training. And I thought, okay, well, that will also help with the mindset side. Most of my clients were coming to me, not just with like, I want to lose weight, but actually they didn't love themselves. So I thought, let me learn about, this mindset stuff. And I went to this training, this 8-day training. And honestly, I feel like I learned more there than I had at 4 years at uni. But what it did for me personally, and understanding how your thoughts are not your reality, how you create your own reality through what you choose to give your energy to. Where your energy goes, where your focus goes, energy flows. And I just all of a sudden was opened up to so much incredible possibility. And so understanding that was huge for the mind. And then following that, gosh, can you see the list of coping mechanisms? When
you've been on a journey.
When you've had so much shit, right, you try everything, and it cracks me up now when people, like if I say, I didn't have a very good night's sleep, and someone messages me and they go, oh, you should try this breathing technique. And I'm like, dude, like I've suffered from insomnia for like 25 years. I think I've tried the fucking breathing technique.
Yeah.
Look, they're trying to help. It's fine. Sorry
of course. I hear you.
I've tried. And then, the last thing that I think is really important that's helped me, particularly in the last 5 years, is somatic work. So that's in your body. As someone with ADHD and anxiety, I am so up in my fucking head all the time. And so, of course, NLP helps because it helped me to navigate all of that chaos in my head. But what I needed to calm down and just enjoy life is actually to get out of my head and into my body from time to time. I honestly don't think it's possible for me 100% of the time. Maybe I'll prove myself wrong eventually. But being able to slow down, check in with my nervous system, which I just didn't understand 5 years ago, and, do things like move through my hips and hold certain yin yoga poses to release emotion and trauma, and do things like breath work, which really oxygenate the blood cells. And like, I just did not realize how much of a difference that could make. And I kind of wish I knew that 10, 15 years ago, but I guess I just maybe wasn't ready for it. And it wasn't as big a deal as it is now, and I'm glad it's become more mainstream.
It definitely has, yeah, for sure. And my goodness, what a ride you just took.
Well, I mean, and that is really probably still only the tip of the iceberg. Like, especially with insomnia, the number of things that I tried, the books that I read, all of these things. And you know what's so funny, Paris, is now I take Ritalin, and Ritalin is a stimulant, right? And ever since taking Ritalin, I sleep so well. So well.
It's funny. It's funny how our body works, hey? And it's crazy. And this is what I like to voice to people, particularly over the podcast as well, that there isn't one way that's going to work for you, which is why you have to kind of explore all of these different techniques to see what does work. I mean, you obviously ended up having ADHD, and so there was going to be certain techniques that were going to work for you in particular, and medications. But then there's like other people who might be still experiencing very similar symptoms, but you know, maybe they can't rely on ADHD medication, or I find that I hate it.
There is a trick, I'll tell you, that so I had to learn this as well. Most of your breath work, you're told to inhale and hold your breath, and that is how you deal with it. And then and hold there and then exhale. It works the opposite for me. So I inhale and then I fully exhale and then hold my breath. And that's what makes me feel less anxious. Okay. So for me, it's the opposite. And I don't remember where someone suggested trying it, but 4 of those, and I feel so much more relaxed. And I don't know how that works, but it had. Actually, I know where I read it. It was the Breath book by James Nestor, which is a brilliant resource for lots of reasons.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. I mean, gosh, it seems like, you were definitely trying to navigate through everything that you were feeling at the time, not really aware of what was going on, why you were experiencing what you were experiencing, and my goodness, to even get engaged, leave the country, runaway bride, essentially. Oh my goodness, that is just wild. Like it's funny. It's not funny, but it's funny because I just can relate to so many instances when I've been in active addiction. I've done some really wild stuff, and I'm like,
if we were in Vegas, we totally would have got married. But he was never going to leave the country. He was one of those like, and that, I mean, I'm an adventurer, and I was like, he doesn't want to travel, but why the fuck would I want to marry him? What am I doing?
My goodness. Well, you definitely touched a little bit about, you know, your coping mechanisms when it came to like alcohol and drugs. So I wanted to ask, you know, can you share with us a little bit more about that experience, like particularly with alcohol and sleeping pills, and like how you overcame that? Because I want listeners to really understand that, particularly with alcohol and sleeping pills, like they're both depressants, right? And it is so dangerous to mix those two. I mean, it can be fatal. So yes, please share us a little bit more about that and kind of how you got
on
past
reflection.
That stage.
I'm actually really angry that the doctor, that the GP gave me that script so easily, because
honestly, I've got so much to say in that. Sorry for cutting you off, but doctors, they do not vet enough in regards to substance use and when it comes to prescribing medication. And that's something that, you know, I really hope will change, but it's something I see very commonly.
Part of the reason it won't change is because the system doesn't support doctors to have the time that they need with patients. Like the other day, I got an email from my psychiatrist, and I know this is going off on a slight tangent, but I got an email from my psychiatrist's office saying, we need an updated referral from your GP. And I'm like, hold on, I'm already coming to you as a patient. I've already been diagnosed. I've already had multiple appointments. Why do I need another referral? And they're like, you need an active referral all the time. And I'm like, so you're telling me I have to go and waste 15 minutes of my GP's time to get them to change the date on a letter to give to you so that you can charge me $250 for 15 minutes of your time? Like, I'm sorry, that doesn't make any fucking sense in any world that exists. So why? And so I feel for GPs because they just get lumped with all the shit that no one wants to do.
That's true.
A side note.
Very true.
The question was about like how I dealt with that addiction in more detail. So I think it took a while, and to be honest, I still had for about a decade, and it's only been in the last maybe 4 or 5 years where I always had sleeping pills next to my bed. It became like this crutch of, if I know it's there, then I can sleep. So I'd created like this story in my head of, if I've got access to it, I don't have to worry, then I can sleep. So I would doctor hop, because, understandably, doctors didn't want to give me sleeping pills. And I was surprised because someone gave it to me when I was like 21, 22. And I'm like, why won't these doctors give me these sleeping pills? And so I used to lie. I'd come up with like these reasons why I needed these sleeping pills. I'm like, something dramatic is happening in my life and I haven't slept in 3 days. Just give me 5 sleeping pills. And I would make these 5 sleeping pills last like 6 months because it was just having them there that was this crutch. Right. And then like I'd literally go to the doctor and be like, see, they've even expired. I have hardly even used them. I just need 5 more. And they'd always just give me enough to not be able to overdose because, of course, my file shows that I've had suicidal ideation, blah, blah, blah. So like, don't give her too many sleeping pills. So I guess, look, credit to a lot of the doctors that wouldn't give it to me easily. But at the same time, there is ways to work the system when you really want it, which, obviously I don't encourage, but this is what people do. And it is good now that a lot of this stuff is centralized so you can see if people are doctor hopping, whereas 10 years ago that wasn't so easy. But what changed that pattern for me was actually doing hypnotherapy. So I can't remember when it was when I was pregnant with my daughter, my second daughter, that I studied some hypnobirthing to help me because I had a traumatic first birth with my first child, and the second one, I was like, I really want to be empowered to have a great childbirth. So I learned about hypnobirthing, and I was like, I can get through this, like just with breathing and just, it's not pain, it's just surges. And it was changing the language. And so I thought, well, if that helped, because then I had the most incredible birth with her. She's 6 years old. And then I was like, what about like hypnotherapy for other things? So I went and studied hypnotherapy because, of course, MG doesn't go, right, I'm just going to like go and see a hypnotherapist. MG wants to know all the things about hypnotherapy. So it was 2019 4 or 5 years ago, 2019, that I went away and I studied hypnotherapy for a week. And it was one of the most mind-blowing weeks. It was with the same people that I studied NLP with. And when you're learning hypnotherapy in the way we did, you also get like your own hypnosis. And that week, I remember like I had my sleeping pills. I'd taken them with me across the country to go to this training, but I didn't use them. And I thought I'd have to because I was sleeping in a new place and, there was different, and there was pressures and all this stuff. Yeah. And I didn't. And I was like, oh my gosh, all I need to do is get myself into this hypnotic state. But then I realized like there was still these thoughts of I need to have this pill packet here. And I actively worked with one of the women that I trained with after that, Linda. She's still a good friend, and oh my God, she is magic because she uses more than hypnotherapy. She also uses Reiki. She uses kinesiology. She's got a wealth of knowledge, and she's a wise older woman, and just her voice, I'm just like, oh, I melt quite often when I'm having moments. I'm like, Linda, let's chat.
Oh, I love it.
She really helped me work through that story. And it came back to knowing that what I was telling myself wasn't true unless I gave it the energy that it was true, that I don't need to have those sleeping pills next to me in order to get to sleep. Like that's just something I'm telling myself. It's not reality. And could I tell myself a different story that helps me to look at it differently and know that, and I think like the story I tell myself now is, even if you didn't sleep tonight, you've had so many nights where you haven't slept and you've coped the next day. So it doesn't even matter. And then it takes the pressure off and I'm like, nah, I don't sleep, whatevs. And then I'm like, okay, sleep.
Alrighty, time to give a shout out to our amazing sponsor, Equine Assisted Wellbeing Institute, which was founded by Felicity Rideout. Felicity is all about teaching others to become equine assisted therapy practitioners, which is a powerful approach that uses horses to help people heal emotionally and mentally. Now, if you're someone who's passionate about horses and you want to make a career out of it, then listen up. They've just launched their Equine Assisted Therapy Practitioner Training and Certification course, which is now available online and accessible to anyone, anywhere in the world. Even if you haven't studied in years or tech isn't your thing, this course is designed to be super easy to follow. You'll get interactive modules, live coaching, unlimited support, and even a business startup kit to help you hit the ground running. Complete the course in as little as 8 to 12 weeks, or you can take your time because you've got up to a year to finish. But the best part is you can snag 10% off by using the code PARIS10 at checkout. And if you'd rather study in person, they do have an option for that too, and they're based in the beautiful Swan Valley in Western Australia. If you're feeling the call, jump on this opportunity to turn your love for horses into a rewarding career. Head to their website, www.equineassistedwellbeinginstitute.com, and sign up today.
So, I mean, that's really the sleeping pills side of things. Alcohol has been a real up and down journey for me. I go through phases of going, I'm not going to drink any alcohol for a certain period of time because it kind of goes up and down, and I'm still there. The thought of giving up alcohol completely for the rest of my life, like I know a lot of people are doing, is really difficult to comprehend right now. And maybe that's something that I need to explore more of, but it's not impacting my day-to-day life like it used to. You know, I don't drink to go to sleep. I buy, this is hilarious, I buy goon bags because they last longer. I can't drink a whole bottle of wine.
Yeah.
So I get a box that lasts 6 weeks. They're nice. They're Banrock Station. Like, they're nice goon bags.
Good goon. Yeah.
But it lasts me like a month, as opposed to if I buy a bottle, I have to drink the whole bottle because otherwise in a few days' time it doesn't taste good anymore. I'm like, it's not like a coping mechanism like it used to be, but there certainly are days still where I go, fuck, I need a drink.
So there's I would definitely say there's more to work on there, but it also comes through that sense of what you mentioned around those stories, those little beliefs that we create for ourselves and how we change those stories. So like with alcohol in particular, you know, a lot of us say, I need to wind down, like when really we should be kind of asking ourselves, what do I really need in this moment? Like, obviously my nervous system isn't regulated. I'm trying to regulate myself through drinking, and that's exactly what it is. Like, it's exactly what we're doing. But it's really hard. Like, you know, when we've got these, I guess, beliefs and these stories that we've created, it's really hard to step out of that, or even to gain the awareness that these are essentially stories, that we don't need to stick to this storyline, that we can change things. And that's where a lot of people get stuck, right? People get really stuck in their stories, and this is why they find it hard to move forward. And I mean, look, as we're saying it, it's like easier said than done.
Yes.
It's very, very hard to, I guess, start unlearning and rewiring these things. But I think at least starting to understand that that is a possibility for you, and to be able to actively start looking at what that means and how that could possibly change, you know, I think is really, really powerful, and an area everyone should explore. I just think it's
absolutely
very, very vital.
It's something I want kids to know. I mean, I have kids now that, my 6-year-old last night called herself a jerk. And I'm like, where the fuck did she get that word from? Because I'm like, I think I call myself, not myself, my husband a dickhead sometimes. I'm like thinking of what I say out loud. I'm like, don't be a dickhead. And I'm like, where did she get jerk from? And I said to her, don't say that. And she said, it's okay. I said it to myself. Like, I wasn't saying it to anyone else. I'm like, no, that's not okay. You need to be kind to yourself. And so the society is already telling her, just don't say mean things to other people, but you can say mean things to yourself, because you can hurt yourself but not others. No. Like,
the power of words as well.
Yeah. And it was all because she couldn't find her toothpaste, you know. But at the same time, so many adults are walking around with that inner child, calling themselves idiots, calling themselves jerks, bad people, blah, 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 because no one has explained to them in those young years where they need to know it and embed it. Saying mean things to yourself is almost worse than saying mean things to others. Because
it really shapes you as a person, and you develop these core beliefs that, again, it's like another story. It's these stories that we come up with, and you know, it's something that I find is really, really difficult to navigate. And the power of our mind is just incredible. Like, we've got so many subconscious things happening, and it's unreal. Like, it's unreal. Like, even I think there was like an experiment done with it was a piece of fruit where they were, I think think it was in a class or something where they were talking bad things like to the fruit, and it rotted more quickly than the one you said good
happens with
things
plants too. So if you have two of the same plants growing, you give it the same nutrients, the same light, the same water, everything, and you whisper to one. So there's a great book called Reality Unveiled about this. Talk to one positively, one negatively, and one will grow beautifully and the other will start wilting away.
Yeah,
Crazy.
It's wild. Hey, like there's so much energy transference there that people don't understand or realize. And even for myself, like I used to think I was pretty funny by setting my alarms up in a way that was like, wake the fuck up, like get up, you dumb bitch.
Yeah.
Like
that's what you're waking up to.
It's like leave the house, slut, like all this stuff.
Yeah, wow.
And then I was like, oh, I'm really like putting in these horrible, like, you know, words to myself. Like, you know, that's not really nice. So now I've changed it, and it's like, you know, time to wake up, beautiful. Like, pack your bags, Crookie. Like, a little Mulan reference, which I love.
The words have so much power.
They do. They really, really do. And I think that's where we all get really stuck. I mean, it's so hard to navigate. So where do you start?
Where do you start? You start with awareness of your thoughts. I think when I was a kid, I used to think talking to yourself and hearing voices meant you were a crazy person. And I was like, oh, man, I have lots of voices in my head. I must be fucking nuts. But then I realized over time that actually everyone has these voices, and they have just different personalities, because you have this voice in there that wants to motivate you, and then you have this voice in there that wants to bring you down, and it's who you choose to listen to at the time. And if I had have said that to my teenage self, would have been like, what do you mean who you choose to listen to? What voices are you talking about? I think kids nowadays, because they've got parents of a different generation, have more understanding of the thoughts that they have. But I didn't understand thoughts at all until I went and studied NLP and went, oh, wow, yeah, like this is just my everyday reality. Is I have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of thoughts, and most of them are negative. And then you go into this spiral. So this is where I think a lot of people end up feeling even worse, is they spiral because they realize they're really negative, and they then judge themselves for being really negative. And then their self-worth spirals because they're like, why can't I change this? What is wrong with me? And then all of those beliefs actually get stronger. So sometimes the whole positive mantra, think positively shit, can be really toxic because we're human and we will have negative thoughts. And we actually need to, like, from a safety perspective, you need to have fear. You need to experience that, but fear-based emotions, because they protect us. Like, if you have zero fear and you just walk across a busy road, you will die. So please have that fear. Yeah. It protects you. Whereas I think the first point when I realized thoughts could just be let go of was during those meditations that I did. So this was before NLP. And one of the meditations was imagining like these clouds, and thoughts came in as clouds. And I've listened to a lot of meditations like that since. So it's become like a pretty common concept. But the thought comes in like a cloud and then it disappears. The thought comes and it just goes, and you just let it go. That was the first awareness of that. And then during NLP, it was going, okay, so now you have an awareness. What do you do with that awareness? If it's a recurring thought, you take the time, I call it like becoming the detective, to prove it wrong. You find evidence around you to prove that thought wrong. Like a thought that I often had with suicidal ideation was that they'd be better off without me. They'd be happier without me. And that was a thought that came up a lot for me. And I started to look for evidence of why that's not true. And I would write that evidence down, because writing, there's something in writing. And I think it's when you write it down, you have to kind of slow down your thoughts a little bit. And so it helps you to focus on it more. So what I would do is I wouldn't necessarily write down the negative thoughts, but I'd write down the reframes, the positive thoughts, or the evidence to the contrary. and focus on that, because that was what I learned with NLP, was what you focus on is what you find. And so I would focus on the evidence of what I wanted to believe. I wouldn't just focus on what I want to believe, but the evidence of it. Like you see these affirmations like, look in the mirror and tell yourself you're beautiful. But if you're saying that out loud and inside thinking, no, I'm fucking not, it's not really working. Right? Like, so instead it's find the evidence that you're beautiful. So it's not just saying I'm beautiful. It's like, oh, I really like how the stress sits on my body today, or, you know, my skin's glowing today. And like actually specifying the evidence, because that helps to start change it. But the other, I think, key thing is really knowing that you are going to have negative thoughts and not judging yourself for those negative thoughts. I will always say to myself, that's interesting, rather than, oh, why the fuck am I thinking that? I'll go, I just said something really mean to myself. That's interesting. Rather than, I said something mean to myself. What a bitch.
Yeah. I mean, it's an opportunity really to look at why you're feeling that way.
Yeah. Where is that coming from? Is that actually my thought? Because often it's something that maybe someone said to you that you've, you know, grasped onto, or it's something that your parents might have said to themselves out loud that you've heard, and then you've started to believe that about yourself. It's like, where did that come from? Often it's from outside of ourselves. And Linda, who I mentioned before, I remember she gave me almost like a visual of returning to sender. Like, imagine that thought goes into an envelope. It's from someone else. Return to sender. That was interesting. Return that to the sender. And so that helps me to let go of those thoughts too.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That was actually really, really good. And I love that, you know, it was very visual. I could really see what you were saying. And I think that, that will help a lot of people actually who are listening to this. But I wanted to go into my next question, which was, you know, getting, again, a little bit deeper into your mental health around your pregnancy. You mentioned, you had prenatal and postnatal depression. Could you talk to us about how that experience was for you? Because I know you mentioned to me previously it was quite a scary time. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit more about that, that would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, and it was one of the darkest moments of my life, to be honest. And it was very hard to talk about for a long time. I don't think I told anyone the depths of it until maybe a few years after it happened, because I felt so alone. We got married, and we did the traditional thing of like, you get married, you build a house, you get pregnant. And I was only 27, and on reflection, like, I felt like I was totally mature enough to have a baby, but I hadn't dealt with so much of my shit that when I got pregnant, it all came to the surface. And I had come off anxiety medication to get pregnant because it was recommended, if you could, to do that. And I was feeling good before I got pregnant externally. But on reflection, I probably wasn't actually good on the inside. I was pushing myself really hard in the gym. I was trying to get abs. I was under 60 kilos. And I remember the day I was 59 kilos. And for me, like, I'm probably just over 70 kilos now because I'm quite tall. And that's a healthy weight for me. But for me at that time, I was really like that was important to me. So there was a bit of body dysmorphia probably happening at that point in time. And then I got pregnant, and then, of course, your body changes and all these things, and I wasn't on medication. And then my husband got a job working away. I was living in the city again. I just moved there from the country. I had no friends. He was away. I was off this medication. I was growing this baby. I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. And all of a sudden I was like, I don't think I can do this. I then experienced a lot of issues during that pregnancy, which on reflection very much could have been due to mental health, because I know now that mental health impacts you physically too. And I got to a point where I was in my third trimester and I didn't want to be around anymore. I had that thought, my baby will be better off without me. My husband will be better off without me. Everyone would just be better off without me. So what can I do about this? And I had this moment where I was sitting down on my bedroom floor Googling how I could successfully end my own life without killing my baby. And I came across all of these articles of women who'd committed suicide when they were pregnant, and it was horrible what people had said. And it was like I felt so much shame, you know. First of all, there was no way that I could kill myself without potentially killing my baby. Second of all, these women that had done that, whether their babies had lived or died, the way they were spoken about was like they were these awful human beings. And so I didn't obviously go through with it, but I remember that moment so vividly because it was a really low moment. And I then went to the doctor to say, I need to go back on my medication. I did not tell him because I was so afraid. I was afraid at that point that they would take me away in a straitjacket and that I would have my baby, but then my baby would be taken away from me. And the pain of that was so much worse than just killing myself. So he wouldn't let me go on medication because I was too close to the end of my pregnancy. And, you know, as we also know, your emotions can actually get worse in those few weeks when you start medication again. And so those last few months of pregnancy were horrendous. I ended up getting inducted for mental health reasons because I couldn't cope anymore. And I mean, in some ways I regret that, but I can't have regrets because like it is what it is. But yeah, it was extremely difficult. And then afterwards, basically as soon as she was born and I went back to the doctor, I was like, we need to get on that medication again. And I'm really glad that I did because I think within about 4 weeks, I started to feel better, but I feel like when you're postnatal and you have a baby, you all of a sudden get all this support. So like there were all these groups that you could join and, you know, the doctors checking in and the midwives are checking in. So I got all this support. And I didn't get that before she was born, which was really disappointing. But I also know that I hid it really well. Like I didn't tell my husband that I was feeling that way. My best friend Rebecca didn't know. She didn't know until 2 years later when I was like, I was in a really dark place. No one knew. Like I did not tell people. I really didn't tell the doctor to the degree that he needed to know in order to put me on that medication. I just was like, look, I'm feeling a bit down. Can I go back on those meds? And he's like, yeah, nah. So understandably, I put myself in that position, but I just felt I couldn't do anything because I felt like such a horrible, evil person for even considering it when I was pregnant. You know, I have this beautiful, she's now 9. Oh my gosh, she's like the most amazing kid. And I'm so grateful to her and I'm getting teary just thinking about it because, you know, like we learned and grew together. She, when she was born, I'd never held a newborn baby. That's why I was like, I was not ready. So we learned how to navigate this together. She was born in winter. I could not, for the life of me, get clothes on this wriggly baby in winter. So we just cranked the heating and we like lived in this sauna house and fumbled through those first few months together. And like we have the most incredible connection. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I love her so much.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. That honestly, it just sounds like it would have been such a difficult time to navigate. And I think particularly where you mentioned postnatal, you got all the support, but prenatal you didn't because, you know, you weren't really reaching out. But in a sense, like you mentioned as well, that, you know, it was fear of, you know, your baby being taken away or, you know, you being sent away somewhere that was going to, you believed that would happen to you. So that prevented you from reaching out. So it just makes me think, I'm like, what can we even do there, like as a society to better help mums going through that? Because I'm sure, you know, you wouldn't have been the only one who's experienced that. Like there would be many women who've gone through a very similar thing and just felt like they couldn't reach out for support because of those potential like consequences.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, it's the same as what you're doing here is having conversations about it. And I feel like since then, you know, it was 10 years ago and more conversations are being had about every stage and how it can impact men, women, children, And so, yeah, there's more conversations happening now, but I do think there needs to be a check-in with the mums during pregnancy around mental health, not just after, because they have the official 6-week after check-in, but during the pregnancy, they focus mostly on the baby, right? Because it's like, as long as your baby's healthy, it's all good. But the thing is, the person that's growing the baby is just as important. And, you know, I reflect and think I had so many insanely horrible thoughts in that time that would have been flooding my poor child. And I didn't even consider that because, you know, that probably would have made me feel worse, to be honest. But, like, that is important. I don't think that medical professionals really think about that kind of thing, to be honest.
No, I wouldn't say so.
But the thing is, like, if you look at it from a scientific perspective, even if you're not getting into the woo energetic stuff, when you think a negative thought, if you are having a suicidal thought, your body is flooded with the hormones and the chemicals that create that feeling of depression, right? That's why the medicines have those synthetically to help you. So they know that, they medicate for that. So then how could they possibly say that it's not going to impact the baby? Of course it fucking is. The baby is growing inside you when you are flooded with those depressive hormones. So
and there's been a lot of studies on that as well, actually, that if a baby had like a really anxious mum, a lot of the time they've developed anxiety, you know, pretty much off the bat. So it's true. It's very true. You know, our thoughts are so powerful and we don't realize the impact they have on us, because I mean, often we are running around not consciously thinking about how they're impacting us and how it could be affecting our physical well-being as well as our mental, right? Like, you know, it's just trying to create that shift and that awareness as well that this is what's actually happening, and trying to look into working on that.
And I think if anyone's a parent and they're listening to this and thinking, oh my God, I've had all these horrible thoughts when I was pregnant, like I now have this 9-year-old who was growing in me with these thoughts, and she, you know, has a tendency towards a bit of anxiety. She's also ADHD. Gosh, I'm sorry, child. But because I have so much more awareness of how thoughts impact our reality and things we can do, like we call it mind magic. She's like, she'll be having a certain thought and I'm like, let's do some mind magic with that thought. Like, how could we think about it differently? And, you know, I actually am grateful for the experience that we both had together in that time, because I feel like it's setting her up with tools that no matter what shit hits the fan in her life, she's actually going to be able to navigate it. Sometimes if a person has had the most perfect life with no things that go wrong and no experiences where you have to navigate it, when things do eventually hits the fan, they don't know how to cope. Whereas my child is going to have some really good experience without, like, subconscious experience, without even knowing it, of how to navigate through that. So I think there's actually a lot of power in it.
Yeah, definitely don't want to make anyone feel that they've done wrong in the sense of feeling the way that they were feeling during that time. I mean, you have to feel how you're feeling, right? It's not, you don't want to be shutting off your emotions. And I do feel like it's important to recognize, you know, doing that work yourself and then what you can teach your children too going forward. And then you'll be able to help them navigate those emotions. Because you've done the work.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
This kind of leads into my next question, actually. So understanding that thoughts are not always reality is an absolute game changer, as we know. So when it comes to your own personal development, so how do you personally differentiate between helpful and harmful thoughts?
I think it's just asking questions about everything. And I do that not just with my own thoughts. I do it with media, I do it with other people's thoughts, but questioning everything and asking, is it true? Is it actually true? Where does this come from? Instead of giving it the power and just determining that it is absolute truth as soon as you've thought it, it's simply questioning it. And that is the most simple way to work out, like, okay, helpful, harmful, things can be helpful or harmful just depending on your perspective. But harmful thoughts are only harmful if you give them enough energy to be harmful. So if I have suicidal thoughts, which do come up from time to time, particularly in the week before my period, I just know that, okay, cool, that's an interesting thought coming up. And is that really true? Is it reality? No, I just, and I don't have this moment of spiraling like, oh, holy shit, I'm having that thought. Oh my God. As soon as I do that, then it becomes harmful. Whereas if I just let that thought kind of float by and go, it's interesting. Okay, if I need to uncover it a little bit more, that's okay. But most of the time it's just like, well, that was interesting. All right, bye.
Yeah, which is, it's so good to be able to do that. I do the same now. It took a while to get to that point, but acknowledging that a thought isn't your reality, that it's not factual, and to just be like, okay, cool, that's interesting. See you later.
Well, if every thought was a reality, I would be in jail for murder. Because I have thought about killing people before. We all have. We've all had that moment, right? Where we're like, I could fucking kill that person right now. And you think that just because you think something doesn't mean you're going to do it. So, which is a very good thing.
Yeah. And I love how you say that, it becomes harmful if you put energy to it. So if you start responding to that thought that's come through and then really, consumed it a little bit more and actually added more thought to it, that's when it becomes harmful.
Yeah, it's like you're just putting fuel on the fire.
Yeah.
Or you just let it fizzle out.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. So you actually kind of already answered my next question, which was if you still ever get thoughts of suicide and how are you managing this? But we already went into that. So how do you identify, I guess, what thoughts are coming from mental health concerns that could be a warning to seek extra help? So that's something I definitely want to dive a little bit more into.
Yeah, so I think it's when they're recurring to the point that I'm not able to just let go of them as easily. And it's been something I've been exploring a bit recently with my cycle, which I know I've brought up a few times now, but I guess that's just because it's the rabbit hole I'm down at the moment, is recognizing that at different points in the month, I struggle to let go of certain ideas and thoughts. And what can I do to support myself with that? And I guess I'm still trying to figure that out at the moment. But the flag for me is when the things that I would usually do to just let it go are not working as well as what they should. And it's usually when I get to the point that I have to talk to my husband about it, or I'll be talking to a friend about it, and I'll realize I obviously haven't let that go before I've got to the point where I'm talking to someone about it. So if I'm talking to someone about it, which is a good sign, right, that I'm having a conversation with someone, but it's not up to my husband to help me. Like, he's there to support me, but he's not a mental health clinician. And even if he was, I wouldn't be going to my husband for it. So I then need to go, what kind of help do I need? And he's fortunate enough that he's never experienced mental health issues to any degree, really. He doesn't really understand what I might need in that time. So I go, okay, well, if I'm talking to him about it, or I'm talking to my best mate about it, something more is going on, and that's when I might need to take more action. And to be honest, most of the time now it's just a holistic action of some description. Like, it might be, I know I've got a lot coming up in my business soon, and I'm starting to feel a bit of pressure, and I've noticed that recurring. So I've booked a weekend away glamping for 3 nights this weekend coming. With no reception, so that I can just have space.
Is that just on your own?
No, it is with the family.
Yeah. Okay.
But I do go away on my own a lot as well. So
awesome.
I actively book space away from the usual hustle, because I very easily get dragged into, I have 2 businesses.
Yeah.
I'm very ambitious. I get overstimulated. Yeah, right. Like, and sometimes you just need to step away. Yeah. And give yourself space. And I'm really grateful that I am in a position that I can do that, because I know not everyone can. But even if it's just an hour of going somewhere without your phone to just, because then you just distract yourself with the podcast or whatever. You might be right now doing it, listening to this. But having space, even if it feels uncomfortable, gives you capacity to process stuff.
Yes.
And like breath work is another one. Like I'll go and do a one-on-one breath work session with someone because usually it just lets me mentally and physically process things.
Yeah, I can relate actually to a lot of what you said. And I know for myself, the way that I identify if I've got thoughts that are kind of happening that are a warning sign of my mental health really starting to dip, because I do have borderline personality disorder and I do have complex post-traumatic stress disorder. God, that's a mouthful.
I know it is. CPTSD.
Yeah.
Even saying the acronym is hard.
Yeah, it is. But I really become familiar now, and this again has come from many years of therapy, become very familiar with my warning signs in the sense of I will get those really recurring thoughts that I really struggle to let go of. And then I'm like, okay, these are hanging around way more than usual. And then I'll also really notice it in my body. I'll get really, really tired. And I'll start napping, and I'm not a napper. So that's usually when I'm like, okay, something's happening here. So I'll start napping.
Napping is a big one though. Like I feel like when that happens, it's your body going, you need to rest. And the rest is when you process things.
Oh, exactly. That is exactly it. That's my body being like, you need to slow down, because I've obviously gotten caught up in the rat race and, I've not been connecting to myself. So I've disconnected. I'm irregular. Like I'm just not, my nervous system isn't regulated and I'm just finding things really hard. But yeah, I will always pretty much book in to see my psych as soon as I can, like when that starts happening, so then I can get on top of it. And then I'll do a lot of grounding techniques. So I'll make sure that, taking that time away to just be completely present, I think has been really, really helpful for me. With my phone, I hate my phone. I absolutely hate it. I don't have any social media notifications on, even though I've got a podcast. I'm very much active on social media, even though I do schedule a lot of posts. So I'm not actually active at the time. But I just find it so much better for my mental health to be able to leave my phone in the bedroom. And then just like this morning, for example, I literally just made breakfast and sat outside with nothing, no phone, no nothing, just did some like deep breaths in, just taking in the fresh air. And I was just listening because I live really close to the beach. I was listening to the sound of the waves and just feeling connected and good like that. I just start implementing that more into my day, like bare feet on the ground as well, maybe for some walks and, just trying to get into nature a little bit really helps me. But, I'm sure.
I think it helps a lot of people.
Oh, for sure. And I just really make sure, like, the most important thing that I do is I go see a mental health professional straight away, because if I don't, and I sometimes, like, these things will stop working and they won't be helping me as much as they could, because my mental health has started going down further. And then I get to a point where I have zero capacity to do anything, and then I don't leave bed for like days. So it's really, really, really important for me to, as soon as I start noticing those changes and seeing that effect in my body, straight to the site.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also that there's like a bit of accountability there as well when you talk to someone else, especially when it's your psych, because they are there to help you. And I know, like, I don't have a psychologist, or I do have a psychiatrist that I see, but really that's just to get the meds for ADHD. I feel like psychiatrists, then they do the medication. Psychologists are, definitely helping you more with strategies. But if you know that you are starting to go backwards, you've got to have like that first step. And if you know what that first step is, then you don't have to think about it each time. Like, you're just like, right, the first thing I need to do when this happens is this. And then you have the capacity to go, okay. It's like with medication. I used to say I wanted to get off medication because I felt Like, I shouldn't have to have medication to feel relieved from anxiety. And then I realized after a while that the medication gave me the baseline to be able to do the other things, because I wasn't able to do the other things before the medication. I just kept like hitting against this wall. And so having that one, whether it's seeing a psych, whether it's talking to a part, whether it's journaling, whether it's whatever it is, like having that one first step that helps you to then take the next step. So you only have to remember one thing, like book in with the psych, and then the rest will come.
Yeah, and I think that's been a big part of like my safety plan, essentially. So I've usually had a plan put together where I've got my warning signs. So I've, been able to do that work to recognize what they are. So I have the warning signs on there. And then, I've got my steps on what I need to do for myself, like, and things that I can try, even if they work or they don't work, but things that I can try and give it a go, like the grounding techniques or any kind of breath work, even though I don't like it. It is still very effective. So I still give it a go. Meditation, things like that, getting into nature, spending time with friends and family as well. Like sometimes I'll even have like my list of my go-to people that I would contact as well. So my support people that I know won't hold, like they'll be able to hold space for me essentially. And they know to basically just come over to my house, and they're like, all right, we're spending a day together. So they already know what to do. They've been a part of my plan. So that's been really, really helpful. And that's something that I've learned to do over the years. And I think everyone who is struggling or experiencing any mental health challenges should have this kind of plan mapped out for themselves.
Yes, because then you've got it mapped out. You don't have to think about it at the time. I want to add on to that around having those people to go to. There are some people that are great to go to in these situations and some people that are not. If you have the friend that's like, let's just go and get drunk and forget about everything, not the right people.
Yeah. I'm glad you're clear on that.
Because those people want to help. Like maybe, and that's what they think, that's their coping mechanism. But yeah, I think having those, even it can literally just be one person, as long as you know that they can hold that space for you without being like, let's go and do something harmful to help you.
Yes, no, exactly. That's exactly it. So what strategies, I guess we have kind of already dabbled in this, but is there anything that you can think of that we haven't mentioned already in regards to self-care techniques that you use today?
Oh, there's so many. I think the biggest one is exercise for me. And really, actually, one that I've done recently that I'm really excited about is I've got a second phone. So you mentioned before how like you hate social media, and I love social media, but I hate it. I have this love-hate relationship. Social media is a place for me to be creative, and I love that, but it's also a place for me to go down a fucking rabbit hole and waste so much of my time. And I find if I spend too much time on it, I feel like shit. So I have got a work phone and a home phone, because, we used to have home phones, right?
Yes.
Now we don't have home phones. And it also annoys me with trying to organize stuff with the kids that we don't have this home phone and everything has to go through Facebook Messenger. And I'm like, no. So this was after my stepdad almost died 6 weeks ago, and he's okay now. He's got a long recovery, but there was a real shock, like, holy shit, life is short. When these things happen, it makes you reevaluate stuff. And I already needed a new phone, but I was like, do you know what? I'm going to have two phones. I'm going to have a phone that is the home phone, and it has Messenger on it, because I do have a lot of people that message me on Messenger, family and friends. And it has Messenger. It has WhatsApp. I can access my personal emails, but not my work emails. And I can access the internet, but there's no social media apps on it whatsoever. And that lives down in the kitchen where your home phone would usually live.
Yeah.
And then my work phone, or like my phone that I use for general day-to-day stuff, because I work 5 days a week, but I also take this phone out and about with me because it's the one that's connected to things that I could, make phone calls with. That's what has got everything else on it. And in the evenings when I finish work, or when I get home from the gym in the morning, that goes just onto my desk, that work phone. and my home phone is downstairs. So if I need to quickly Google something, I can. If I need to send a message to my mum, I can. If my mum needs to get hold of me, she can. My husband needs, so there's that distinction. And I've only been doing that for like 3 weeks. And I mean, to be honest, what I've noticed the most is I feel like I'm a better parent because I'm just more present with my kids. And that is really important to me because I have 2 girls and I'm so worried about them growing up in this world of social media. So if it's just that makes me feel better and gives me the ability to connect with my kids better, which will help me connect with myself better, then I'm so happy with that. But I know not everyone can get 2 phones. However, you can get phones really cheap. And for your home phone, you don't need all the things, right? You just need to have the messenger, whether you use Messenger or WhatsApp or whatever, to contact people and access to the internet. And you can get like $50 phones that do that now. So
yes, yeah.
I honestly feel like that would be a great way for a lot of people to navigate the scroll hole, the doom scroll that we get into that fucks with our mental health.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that you're doing that because that's actually, it's funny you mentioned that because I was starting to think about doing that because I was so over using my personal phone for all my work stuff and this is why I would leave it in my room, but then people are contacting me for work and I wasn't obviously responding straight away, but I mean, everyone's kind of gotten used to me not responding straight away now. And people know, all my friends know, don't bother messaging me on Facebook. If you need an instant reply, you need to text me. I won't.
Yeah, and I think it's okay to have those boundaries and say, now I've got, so my bestie that, we message 50 times a day, she knows on the weekend that there's certain ways she can't contact me.
Yes.
So then we switch over to a different platform. Otherwise during the week we message in 3 fucking platforms and it's mental, but if not more, God, I think there's more than 3 now. But, tell people, and if they want to get in contact with you, it's up to them.
Yeah.
And you know what? Back in the day, if people couldn't get in contact, they'd just find someone to go knock on your fucking door.
Exactly. Yeah. It's crazy how much time has changed. But yeah, we will be fine. You don't have to answer to every single person immediately as well. And that's another thing that I think a lot of people need to remember. They get caught up in their notifications being enough and it's an immediate response of got a reply, but you don't actually have to. Which is why I turn off all my notifications.
Become the person that doesn't. You can actually very intentionally become that person. So what I do now, if I see a message as it comes up, I will quite often intentionally ignore it.
Oh yeah,
because I do not want to train the person to think that I reply immediately.
Yeah.
So I see it and I'm like, cool, mark as unread, and I walk away. Hopefully I don't forget about it. But that's why I mark as unread.
I do the same.
And they might be sitting there thinking, oh, my God, she's read my message, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, I don't care. That's your shit. I'm going to train you right now that I do not respond right away, even though I've responded in my head and now there's an open loop. Long term, it is so much better for me to make sure that people don't expect that of me. And it just becomes I'm the same. I have friends that are like, I know if you don't reply that it's not you, it's your ADHD. And I'm like, yes, thank you for the excuse, ADHD. I don't have to reply straight away because I forget. But I'm happy to be that person in my group of friends that is not contactable all the time because it gives me freedom.
I love it. I really do. But, I think this is why I wanted to get a second phone too, is because I often have my phone on silent, and then there has been times when people have tried to urgently call me because of something that's happened, and then I'm not answering, and I'm like, oh shit. So that's the one
and
thing.
You don't even need a phone number on that second phone, so you can get digital phone numbers now.
True,
so you just get an app, and it doesn't need to be connected to Telstra or whatever. It just and then it will ring like a home phone. I haven't set it up yet. I still need to do that. It's on my list to do these school holidays. But that way I give that number to people, and if people want to call me, they can, but I'm only giving that number to people that I want to give that number to.
Yeah, exactly. Keeping it limited. Well, to wrap it up today, I mean, we've we've had a really good yarn today. I've loved it. I loved everything that we've chatted about today. But what advice would you give someone who might be listening who could be experiencing mental health issues and doesn't know what to do?
The number one thing I would say is probably not what everyone else would say. And I know most people would say, go and talk to someone. And I'm not saying don't do that. But the number one thing I would say is don't judge yourself for it. Be kind to yourself for it. Have empathy and compassion for yourself, because you're not alone and you're not crazy. It's not something that's wrong with you. It's just an experience that you're having right now. And I don't want to make it sound like when I say it's just an experience that, it's not, it doesn't feel big, but it will pass. Everything passes. The only constant is change. Everything is always changing, including you and your state of being. So when you notice this happening, yes, seek help, talk to someone, but also have self-compassion and be kind to yourself in your thoughts, because that will help alleviate how deep and desperate it feels, because you're being kind to yourself about it. Despite, you can be both. You can be desperate, you can be suicidal, you can be hating the world, you can be all of that at the same time as being kind to yourself. I truly believe they can coexist. And I have experienced that multiple times now, that yes, I hate the world. Yes, I don't want to be here, but I also love myself enough to know that that's just my experience right now. And I'm not a bad person for it. I'm not broken for it. It just is what it is right now. So letting go of that judgment of self.
I couldn't agree more. That was beautifully said. Thank you so much, Em. Well, thank you for being on the show today. I've absolutely loved having you on. We had a great yarn. I think that was really, really good. I
feel like we might have gone a bit over time.
Don't worry about it.
I always have so much to say on everything. And I used to judge myself for that. And now I'm like, nah, you know what? I can never be too much for the right people.
No, and I found that all so valuable. There was a lot to take away from that. So thank you so much for coming on today and for sharing that knowledge and wisdom with us. And I'll be in touch with you soon.
Thank you so much for having me. I've loved having this conversation. It lights me up to share this stuff with people, and hopefully it helps.
All right, well, you enjoy the rest of your day and we'll speak soon. Bye.
Bye.